Lass uns über das Attentat auf Donald Trump sprechen. Es ist in den vergangenen Tagen viel spekuliert worden über die Hintergründe, über die möglichen Drahtzieher und so weiter. Was aber einigen Beobachtern auffiel, ist das Verhalten des Secret Service, der für die Sicherheit des republikanischen Präsidentschaftskandidaten zuständig war. Zahlreiche Zeugen geben an, dass der Secret Service Warnungen über einen Mann mit Gewehr auf dem gegenüberliegenden Gebäude nicht ernst genommen hat. Erst als der Schütze Trump bereits angeschossen hatte, griff der Secret Service ein. Scharfschützen eliminierten den Angreifer binnen weniger Sekunden. Wie bewertest du das Vorgehen des Secret Service? Wie konnten sie den Angreifer so schnell ausschalten, wenn sie ihn vorher nicht im Visier hatten? Hat der Secret Service Donald Trump am vergangenen Samstag professionell beschützt?
The Secret Service has one job and one job only when it comes to, personal protection, and that's to prevent somebody from taking a shot at the person being protected. People can talk about how the Secret Service responded, covering him, getting him off the stage. I mean, apparently that's not without criticism too. But I recall, after the attack, a recently retired member of the Secret Service appearing on TV, praising the Secret Service. The Secret Service saved Donald Trump's life. No, they didn't. The Secret Service has one job, and that's to prevent somebody from taking a shot at the president. Somebody took 5 shots at the president, one of which should have been fatal. Donald Trump should be dead today. It's just a miracle of timing, the position of the head. Had his head been positioned in any other direction, orientation, we would have seen the impact of a 5.56 millimeter round, high velocity round, what it does to a skull when it hits it. It's not pretty. And it would have played out on live TV. People would have seen what we call pink mist in the the vernacular of the military, of military snipers. That's what should have happened. This was a well-executed assassination attempt. Donald Trump should be dead today. The Secret Service failed 100%. And anybody who articulates anything other than that, you have to ask why. Are you covering something up? Are you trying to hide something? It's early. We don't know all the facts, all the details, but we know enough to know that this was more than just incompetence. First of all, we need to understand that the Secret Service, by its very nature, is institutionalized in such a way that incompetence is not tolerated. You don't get selected for a presidential security detail, and that's what this is. Even though he's a presidential candidate, he's a former president and a man whom you can't say won't be president. So he has to be treated as if he were the president. That's their job. And they failed. And it's not an accident. That's my take, that this is deliberate. That'll be left up to the investigation. But you can't have somebody penetrate what is supposed to be an impenetrable security perimeter, and then take a picture-perfect approach that only a professional would do. I mean, to be honest, the way he approached the target was professional, designed to use terrain features, the slope of the roof, to shield him from counter snipers. His shooting was skilled. To immediately pop up and fire off 5 rounds, at least one of which should have been a killing shot. That's not the work of an amateur. He was coached. Who coached him? Who trained him? Not just trained him in the concept of pulling the trigger, but on that specific terrain. Somebody knew that building would be carved out of the Secret Service's perimeter. Who made that decision? Was that a Secret Service decision? Because that makes no sense. That's the number one threat. That's the one place the Secret Service should have been. Maybe up on the water tower too. That's where you have to have Secret Service protection. To delegate this, to downgrade this to local law enforcement, and then wash your hands of it implies that this was an act of carelessness, deliberate carelessness. And then What about local law enforcement? How did this person get through that? How did this person make it up to the top? Why wasn't this person interdicted? These are questions that hopefully an investigation will ask. But I don't think what we saw was a lone wolf thing. This kid had explosives based upon the mechanism of implementation. He was supposed to initiate an explosion from where he was. People would say that would be a distraction, to blow up the van, distract people, and then take the shots. We don't know, but we need to find out, where did he get the explosives from? What was the configuration of the bomb? What kind of bomb was it? Was it a bomb that is built based upon information you can get off of the internet? Does the internet contain, information on how to do remote detonated explosives? What was the nature of the trigger? They say every bomb maker has a signature. What's the signature of this bomb? And now the question is, who investigates? Right now they have Department of Homeland Security. Are they going to keep the National Security Division of the FBI out of this? FBI is by law required to investigate this, the National Security Division. But they're the ones who have been going after Donald Trump since 2016. It was the National Security Division of the FBI that initiated Operation Crossfire Hurricane, which was a 100% manufactured case designed to keep a man from being president. So the FBI is a politicized agency. Much of what the FBI has done against Donald Trump in the recent years only underscores that fact. The raid on Mar-a-Lago, the way the information was collected, the selective prosecution, there's great concern. So do you want FBI bomb technicians looking at this bomb when it may be their signature? I'm reminded of the movie No Way Out, when Kevin Costner is working to find, a Russian agent inside the Pentagon, and he's the Russian agent. And, and so as the information is being developed, he's realizing, oh, I'm in trouble. You can't have the FBI involved because they're the top suspects. FBI and the Secret Service are the top suspects. Check the bank accounts of the local cops who got money, who was told they were going to leave. There's a local mayor in the area that advocated for the physical removal of Donald Trump. Did he play a role? There's just so much about this that doesn't make any sense. And this is, it can't be treated casually. This is a direct threat to American democracy when you have, as you have to have. I mean, I hate conspiracies. People have been trying to get me to dive into 9/11 conspiracies from day one, and I won't do it. But this isn't a conspiracy. These are facts. This is factual statements that can't be argued away by incompetence or mistakes. The Secret Service is an institution that doesn't tolerate mistakes. There's zero tolerance for mistakes. They have, institutionalized procedures that prevent this very thing. This was a deliberate act. This isn't that they had inadequate procedures. It's because somebody went in and altered the procedures they had to make this situation possible. There's no other way to interpret this, which means Donald Trump isn't safe, which means no president is safe. Nobody's safe. If the people who are charged with protecting the president are responsible for facilitating the assassination of a would-be president, we got problems. And I'm just telling you right now, we got problems in America. This needs to be investigated. Is Department of Homeland Security the one that needs to do that? I don't know, because they are politicized too. Do we have a police institution in America that hasn't been politicized? Maybe the U.S. Marshal Service, because their job is purely to hunt down bad guys. Maybe we need Tommy Lee Jones, to come out of the U.S. Marshal Service and take over this investigation. Maybe we need to find, get a collegium of state police investigators who come together, mandated by Congress, because Congress must get their nose in this. Do not let the institution investigate the institution. Congress needs to get involved. Congress needs to take the lead, and Congress needs to pick people who aren't politicized, people who are looking at purely the law enforcement aspect of this, the tactical aspect of this, and bring those to account. And if this requires the elimination of the Secret Service, if the Secret Service is corrupt, the entire secret, if one part is corrupt, the entire thing is corrupt, needs to go. If the FBI needs to go, it needs to go. We have a disease. We have a not just politicized security apparatus, we have a weaponized security apparatus that sought to assassinate the man who very well could be president of the United States after November, on the eve of the Republican National Convention, where he would be anointed as the official Republican candidate for the presidency of the United States. 2 + 2 = 4. And that's the math we have right here. This was a planned assassination where the people who were supposed to protect the president were involved in implementing and facilitating the assassination. That's my take.
Du lebst in den USA. Wie hat sich das Attentat auf Trump auf das politische und gesellschaftliche Klima in den Vereinigten Staaten ausgewirkt? Wenn man bedenkt, dass einige Medien statt von einem Attentat nur von einem Zwischenfall oder einem Unglück sprechen. Wenn man bedenkt, dass schon seit langem von Politikern und Prominenten dazu aufgerufen wird, Trump auszuschalten. US-Präsident Joe Biden selbst hatte nur wenige Tage vor dem Angriff formuliert, Trump müsse ins Visier genommen werden. Und auch nach dem Attentat äußern einige Prominente Bedauern, dass Trump verfehlt wurde. Was sagt das aus über die politische und gesellschaftliche Lage in den USA? Und was wäre, wenn statt Trump Biden angeschossen worden wäre?
Look, America's gone insane. We've been insane for a number of years. We're a deeply divided society between, I think, people who believe that the establishment can be trusted to govern us. I will call these people Democrats, and Republicans. They're part of the duopoly, because we basically have two parties that have shared power for, centuries, and they believe that this system works for them. They have an establishment that can operate, regardless of which party is in power. The establishment maintains institutions that back both parties. I mean, you see this when you have major donors writing checks to both Democrats and Republicans. They're sort of playing both sides because they expect whoever is elected to higher office to do their bidding. And so far, that's what this has done until we get a Donald Trump. A Donald Trump is a unique political phenomenon. Yes, he has an R next to his name right now, but he is an anti-Republican. MAGA is how you would describe him. Make America Great Again. And the people that have surrounded him aren't Republicans. They're MAGA people. It's their own thing. Trump has taken over the Republican Party. And so we have basically a nation divided between people who believe in the establishment and people who reject the establishment. This is visceral stuff. This is existential stuff. You can't have a duopoly that's governed for decades, if not over a century, willingly give up power. We just saw that. They won't willingly give up power. They tried to kill Donald Trump. And now we have MAGA, who is saying, you can't stop us. We have a right. We have the momentum. We have the votes. They firmly believe that 2020 was a stolen election. And while the establishment, and let's remember what I'm saying here, while the establishment says it wasn't stolen, if it was stolen, it would have been stolen by the establishment, and they're not going to turn themselves in. And so MAGA firmly believes that 2020 was stolen, and they are saying, you will not steal this next election. And if it is stolen, then MAGA will basically feel as if they have no other choice but to seek alternative means. That means non-constitutional means, that means violence. And that's the direction this country is headed, towards a existential divide that can only be resolved through violence. We have an opportunity because of this assassination to calm things down. And you see Donald Trump at least making initial moves in that direction. He says he tore up his speech. I would have liked to see what his draft is, what he was originally going to read on Thursday. I would imagine that it was full of fire and fury, retribution and things of that nature. But he seems to be a changed man. I think this brush with death has resonated with him in ways that might be similar to how Ronald Reagan's assassination attempt resonated with him and caused him to walk away from an existential confrontation with the evil empire, the Soviet Union, instead seek ways to de-escalate and eventually pursue arms control and disarmament. Who knows? It's too early to say, but there is a chance that if Donald Trump is elected and his selection for vice president turns out to be a wise selection. We don't know. The jury is still out on J.D. Vance. There's much not to like about him. I mean, we have a nation in a world that is not a fan of the ongoing genocide in Palestine. And J.D. Vance, of course, is somebody who supports that. But then again, so does Donald Trump, and then again, so does Joe Biden. Then again, does RFK Jr. That's the problem with the empowered elite. You can't make it to the top unless you have sold your soul to the pro-Israeli lobby, and the pro-Israeli lobby is in control. There is that, but Donald Trump is a transactional president. He deals with the present reality. He's the only president, the only candidate who's come out and said that it takes two to pursue peace in the Middle East, and Israel doesn't want to pursue peace. So he recognizes that Israel is the problem for a peaceful resolution. There's nobody else that recognizes that, at least hasn't articulated it that way. I think Donald Trump will inherit a reality, if he becomes president, a reality in the Middle East that will require him to chart a different course. And because he's not of the establishment, he's not beholden to the plans put forward by the establishment, he can do his own thing. Will he do the right thing? We don't know. Maybe not. Probably not, because of his pro-Israeli proclivities. But at least there's the potential within Donald Trump to do something different. So all the negatives that we see out there, might manifest in a different way, maybe neutral, maybe positive. The jury's out. We do know that if you vote for Biden, you're going to get a continuation of past practice, which has got us leading on the edge of a nuclear war with Russia and genocide in the Middle East, potential conflict with China. These are three things that are very bad, and a vote for Biden guarantees these three things will continue on the path that they're headed towards violent resolution. American society, in order to break the chains that have bound America to the policy trap that it currently exists, the so-called establishment must be purged. Now, how is that going to happen? I mean, Project 2025 speaks of firing all of the administration staff and replacing them with Trump loyalists. Maybe that's what has to happen. Maybe that's what's needed, but it isn't going to happen in 4 years, which is why J.D. Vance is interesting, because if he can be the new Trump and get elected, there's a potential 12-year cleansing period that could take place in the United States. And this could change everything. This could fix problems at home. It could change the way America interfaces with the world. People keep talking about the need for the great reset for America, but they're proposing violence, civil war, revolution. We have a chance with Donald Trump where we could have a nonviolent revolution, where we could cleanse ourselves. Who knows? But all I know is that this failed assassination attempt has opened that door for that possibility. It's not a guaranteed outcome. In fact, if I were betting, I'd say it's more likely than not that it won't happen this way, but there's a chance. And that's more than we have if we keep the establishment in place. So this failed assassination attempt, I think, is having a major impact on the American election. An election that could have gone either way is now just flowing all into Donald Trump. And it's not just going to be him. The Democrats were talking about not just securing the presidency for Biden for 4 more years, but maybe kicking the Republicans out of the House, securing the Senate and the House. Right now, it looks like it might be a landslide Senate, landslide House, that the Republicans are going to control in dominant fashion both houses of Congress and the White House. And this creates the opportunity for radical change, because the people that are going to populate the Senate and the House are going to be MAGA, not Republican, MAGA. which means they're going to be loyal not to the establishment and party past practices, but to the dictates of Donald Trump. Dictates. There's the risk. Is this going to be a continuation of American democracy, or is this going to become a quasi-dictatorship? We don't know. Very dangerous times, very unsettling times. And this assassination just made things even more unsettled. But it does provide relative clarity that unless the Democrats do something dramatic, we're looking at a clean sweep for the MAGA Republicans in November.
Mitte Mai wurde der slowakische Ministerpräsident Robert Fico niedergeschossen. Nur knapp überlebte er das Attentat. Jetzt am Wochenende entkam Trump nur um Zentimeter einer tödlichen Verwundung durch das Attentat auf ihn. Erleben wir gerade eine Phase gewaltsamer Eskalation in der Politik? Und ist es ein Zufall, dass derzeit vor allem Politiker zur Zielscheibe werden, die in Opposition stehen zu der von der US-Regierung und der NATO vorangetriebenen Geopolitik? Womit rechnest du in den kommenden Monaten vor der US-Wahl?
I learned a new term the other day, and I might not pronounce it properly, but stochastic terrorism. I'm probably saying that wrong. But the idea is that you have an establishment leadership quantify a problem as being existential, as representing an existential threat. And usually you can do this by turning to people and saying, he is an existential threat. She is an existential threat. An existential threat means you are a threat to life and death. I mean, it's a life and death issue. It's not, a simple debate. It's life and death. In the United States, Donald Trump has been labeled by Joe Biden and the establishment as representing an existential threat to American democracy, to America itself, to the constitutional order. And when you're labeled that way, it invites violence. It invites a violent solution. I've likened this to, there's a movie based on a Stephen King novel called The Dead Zone. And in it, a character played by Christopher Walken is empowered to see into the future, and he meets a Senate candidate played by Martin Sheen, whom when he shakes his hand, he sees the future, that Sheen becomes president, orders a nuclear strike without any justification on the Soviet Union, creating Armageddon, ending the world. And he asks his neurologist, therapist, who is a Jew, if you could go back in time and kill Adolf Hitler before he committed the Holocaust, would you? Even if it meant you would lose your life. And the guy said, yes, that's what I would do. And so now Christopher Walken's character says he has no choice now but to kill Martin Sheen's character because he represents an existential threat to the nation. Now that's just a movie, but the psychology that's embedded in that is the psychology that exists when a president of the United States points to a political opponent and says he is an existential threat to the United States. He is a danger to America. He cannot, under any circumstances, be allowed to be elected. What do patriotic Americans do then? You've been told that if this guy gets elected, America will be destroyed. And there will be people out there who say that is my signal, that I have to kill Adolf Hitler before he commits the Holocaust. I have to kill Donald Trump before he destroys America. I have to kill Robert Fico before he destroys Europe, before he destroys NATO. I have to kill Viktor Orban before he destroys NATO. I have to kill Marie Le Pen before she destroys NATO. Do you see where I'm going here? This has stopped being an environment where people can disagree. The establishment, and that's what we're talking about, the establishment, which transcends, not just the United States, but Europe, refuses to yield the power they've enjoyed for decades. And therefore, they've conflated their political survivability with the survivability of the societies they ostensibly serve and protect, forgetting that societies get to decide in democratic nations who gets to represent them. That if the institutions aren't engaging in policies that benefit the people will get rid of the establishment and replace it with something that does benefit the people. The establishment can't have that. And we've seen the arrogance. I mean, your own foreign minister, Wehrt, I don't care what the German people think. Really? You're a minister in a democracy. I don't care what they think. We're going to support Ukraine no matter what. What else don't you care about? Apparently, you don't care about the people. So what other policies are you implementing that, and who are you serving? Because if you're not serving the German people, who are you serving? You're serving the establishment. Therein lies the problem. I think political violence is being openly advocated and facilitated by the establishment to destroy anybody or any group that dares challenge their hold on power. This is a very dangerous time, because if you take away the tools of democracy from an impassioned people who are desiring change, then we reflect on the Declaration of Independence, when people who are unhappy with the government take matters into their own hands and revolutions begin. No matter how noble the American Revolution was at conception, we have to acknowledge that it was violent. It led to a war that lasted many years, and it led to societal changes where people who were loyal to the crown were purged from America. We have to reflect on, what has happened in Yugoslavia, where societies turned against each other. Muslims turned against Christians. In Bosnia, people who lived in peace and harmony side by side were ripping each other's throats out and hearts overnight because of civil war. This is what's going to happen. Revolution, civil war, famine, violence, destitution. If the establishment that claims to be democratic in nature forgoes actual democracy, denies the will of the people an opportunity to be manifest through elections, the only alternative is revolution. And I will tell you this, revolutions that are deeply grounded in popular discontent never fail. They never fail. Show me one instance where a dictator has held on to power when the people, not minorities, the people turned against him. Didn't work for the Tsar, didn't work for the British, doesn't work for anybody. So if Europe wants to explode, continue to suppress democracy. And if America wants to implode, continue to suppress democracy. It's not about compelling people, forcing people, suppressing their ideas. If you don't agree with the ideas of somebody, come up with better ideas. That's the way it should be. Put your ideas on the table, have a debate, have a discussion, have a dialogue. That's what civil society is supposed to do. And if you get beat, if more people like the other ideas, instead of shooting those people, come up with better ideas. Figure out what it is that you did that was wrong, that didn't resonate, and change it so that the next time the will of the people can be manifested through elections, your ideas resonate greater than the ideas that beat you last time. Wow, democratic society, But, that's what we are supposed to be. I mean, we just take a look at the nonsense that Europe's doing with Georgia right now, where they're telling Georgia that you have to become part of Europe because that is democracy. When, in fact, the Georgian people, not the Georgian opposition, the Georgian people who have empowered a Georgian government through democratic processes are saying, we don't want that. We don't want to sell our soul. We don't want to become something we're not, to join your establishment. And if you're pressuring us, forcing us, sanctioning us so that we do that, that's not democracy. That's dictatorship. Anyways, that's where I stand on that.
Vergangene Woche gaben US- und Bundesregierungen bekannt, dass ab 2026 US-Mittelstreckenraketen auf deutschem Boden stationiert werden sollen. Die Rede ist dabei von SM-6-Raketen, Tomahawk-Marschflugkörpern und irgendwann auch Hyperschallraketen vom Typ Dark Eagle. Bundeskanzler Olaf Scholz nennt das einen wichtigen Schritt für die Sicherheit Europas, die dazu diene, einen Krieg zu verhindern. Faktisch bedeutet es, dass zum ersten Mal seit Ende des Kalten Krieges wieder in Deutschland US-Raketen stehen würden, die in der Lage wären, Moskau zu treffen. Russland stellte klar, dass im Fall des Falles die russische Luftabwehr die US-Raketen abwehren könnte, die europäischen Hauptstädte jedoch zum Opfer des russischen Gegenschlags werden würden. Wie bewertest du die Stationierung von US-Mittelstreckenraketen in Deutschland? Dienen sie tatsächlich der Sicherheit Europas, wie Scholz behauptet?
If Germany allows this deployment to go forward, Germany will cease to exist in 5 years. Europe will cease to exist in 5 years. The world may cease to exist in 5 years, but I guarantee that Germany will cease to exist. You've just become a legitimate nuclear target for Russia. Russia is now building classes of missiles that are by design intended to take out German targets. Everybody needs to understand. I mean, what kills me is that Germany at one time was a rational nation, West Germany especially. Back in 1982, when a decision was made to deploy U.S. intermediate range missiles onto German soil in response to the Soviet Union's deployment of the SS-20 Pioneer Road Mobile intermediate system, the German people took to the streets. Europe took to the streets and said, no, we understand what the risk is here. Now, the missiles were deployed because I think the feeling was that the only way you could negotiate the elimination of the Soviet SS-20 was to put something on the table that could be negotiated away as well. But eventually we had the 1987 INF Treaty, Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty, that I was a proud part of it. We got rid of these missiles. And Germany suddenly didn't have to live under the umbrella of imminent nuclear annihilation. I oftentimes joke when I talk about this period of time, and I would say it to every German out there, if you ever saw me in the street, stop, shake my hand, thank me, and buy me a beer, because I saved your life. Me, the other inspectors, the Soviet inspector, we saved your life. And you can go, huh, what, really? The time of flight of the Pershing II, by the time it was launched, and by the time it would hit Moscow, depending on where it was located, 7 to 12 minutes. In 1995, there was an incident where a rocket was fired out of Norway. It was an atmospheric test rocket. The Russian early warning systems detected it and interpreted it as a Trident missile being fired on a low trajectory that was going to decapitate Russian leadership with a preemptive strike. Boris Yeltsin had the nuclear suitcase put in front of him, and he was told, you have to launch the counterstrike now, because if that is what it is, it's going to kill us, and we're all going to die. And he almost did it. He held off just long enough for somebody to make the phone call that said, no, that's a test rocket, not an incoming Trident, and the world avoided death. If there were Pershing rockets in Germany at the time, Yeltsin would have had no choice but to hit the button, and we'd all be dead. Guaranteed, 100% certainty, everybody would be dead. But because we eliminated those weapon systems, it bought some time. There were processes in place, hotlines, people could talk, and we avoided a nightmare scenario. Germany's putting the very same weapons back into place in its soil. The Dark Eagle is a hypersonic system. Once it's fired, it could hit Moscow within minutes. Understand that means that there is no more buffer zone where people can talk, people can consider, people can make phone calls. It requires the Russians now to be on an instant hair trigger alert, so that the moment they detect anything that could suspiciously be a hypersonic preemptive strike, they will fire their strike. No questions asked, because that's the way it has to be. The other thing that happened in the 1980s is that we actually had diplomats that talked to each other. 1982, July 16th, we just had the 42nd anniversary of it. Paul Nitze met with his Soviet counterpart in the Walk in the Woods in Geneva, where they talked about, how they could move forward on a treaty that would restrict or eliminate intermediate nuclear forces, the most dangerous weapon in the world at that time. We were talking to each other. We had diplomacy. We entered into arms control negotiations that manifested themselves into arms control treaties. Today, the United States is in the process of ripping up treaties. Why are we deploying intermediate nuclear forces systems back into Germany when we had a treaty that got rid of them? Because Donald Trump withdrew from that treaty, and Joe Biden has sustained that action, even though Russia said we're not going to build these missiles. Now Joe Biden has deployed these missiles in training scenarios last September in Denmark, and now they're going to permanently deploy them. Russia is now building the systems. They're going to deploy them in a way that threatens all of Europe. And we're not talking to each other. There is no diplomacy taking place. Germany has signed on to a NATO strategy that seeks to strategically defeat Russia. This is the stupidity of the establishment in the West, the suicidal stupidity of these people. And I always pick on the German people. In 1982, you went in the streets. You went in the streets. Where are you now? If you let the United States deploy these weapon systems on your territory, you are basically saying, we want to be nuked by Russia because you will be nuked by Russia. It's a 100% guaranteed outcome. We don't have any checks and balances. Ask yourself, you genius German people, because you are smart. You guys have done a lot of things throughout history. You're not stupid people. But you act stupid sometimes. Ask yourselves, what is the diplomacy that your government is willing to undertake to prevent this? What mechanisms have they put in place? You got Baerbock as your foreign minister. She doesn't care what you think. You got Scholz, who thinks this is a good thing, deploying these missiles. Where's the diplomacy? Where's the reason for these missiles? What is the purpose of these missiles? Because if it's about putting pressure on Russia to achieve the strategic defeat of Russia, you do understand that the Russian nuclear doctrine says that if any pressure is put on Russia that threatens its existential survival, it will use nuclear weapons to resolve this issue. Do you think this gives you a nuclear advantage? No, it's just a nuclear trigger. It just makes the inevitable release of nuclear weapons that much more likely. No diplomacy. There's no safeguards. Where's arms control? The INF Treaty is dead. You're allowing it to die. You're putting the stake into by letting these missiles deploy on your soil. The New START Treaty ends very soon. There's no negotiation taking place. There's no arms control. There's no talk. There's nothing. There's no checks and balances. This is the most dangerous situation that has faced the world in the nuclear era, more dangerous than the Cuban Missile Crisis. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, we had diplomats talking to one another. And the Cuban Missile Crisis set in motion a desire by both parties to limit the growth of their nuclear arsenals and eventually lead to the reduction through arms control and disarmament talks. Where's that momentum? Doesn't exist. The threshold for the use of nuclear weapons has been reduced by both sides. Germany, did you not hear what the outgoing NATO Secretary General said? Where he said that, we've got these B-61 bombs that are part of the NATO nuclear deterrent. And he wants to take 24 of them and put them on operational standby. Okay, now you might think that's cute, but let me tell you why it's not. The B-61 bomb is delivered by designated aircraft in the NATO arsenal. Germany has some of those aircraft. Now, these are dual-purpose aircraft. You can use them to do air defense, or you can use them to drop conventional bombs. But every time one of these aircraft take off, the Russians have to assume there's a potential here. Potential. Now, if those weapons are in storage, not operationalized, the Russian threshold of concern, gets lowered. They're like, okay. But if you put 24 bombs on operational standby, every single time an F-16 or an F-35 takes off from anywhere in Europe, the Russians have to say there's a nuclear bomb on that. And if that plane starts flying towards Russia, the Russians have to say that's an attack. That's the world that you're going to live in now, Germany. And that's your government that's done this. What are you going to do to save yourselves? Because only you can solve this. If you're not in the streets protesting this, then you're part of the problem. you're not the solution.
Kannst du bitte ins Detail gehen, was die technischen Eigenschaften der SM-6-Raketen und der Tomahawk-Marschflugkörper angeht? Die Tomahawk-Marschflugkörper wurden ja ursprünglich in den 1980er Jahren in Dienst gestellt. Entsprechen sie noch den Anforderungen der modernen Kriegsführung? Bundeskanzler Scholz sprach von einer Notwendigkeit der Verbesserung der Luftabwehr und der Abschreckungswirkung. Können diese Raketen bzw. Marschflugkörper dazu beitragen?
The SM-6 is a short-range missile. It's started off basically being an anti-ballistic missile designed to shoot down ballistic missiles, but it has the ability to be used in a surface-to-surface mode. Its range is under 300 miles, so it's a short-range system, which technically isn't in violation of the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty. When it was deployed, it's deployed as part of what's known as the Mark 70 Containerized Missile Launch System. Basically, it's a modified ISO container that has a ability to erect a pod that can contain either cruise missiles, the Glickums, or the SM-6. The SM-6 has been brought to Europe for coastal defense. It was brought in as part of an exercise in Denmark where it was being used to show how you can shut off shipping lanes from Russian traffic to take control of the shipping lanes. But it can contain the ground launch version of the Tomahawk missile, which can fly out to ranges of 1,800 miles. Now, this is an old system. It's been around for a while. There have been some modifications to its guidance, et cetera. But, Russia has shown, for instance, when this system was used to attack Syria back in Donald Trump's administration, I think 2017, many of these missiles were shot down or otherwise prevented from going to their target by air defense and electronic warfare capabilities. So it's an aged system. But you can't ignore the fact that you now have a system that reaches 1,800 miles into Russia. It's a strategic capability that Russia has to counter. The greatest threat is the Dark Eagle. The Dark Eagle is a hypersonic missile that, if it's deployed, radically changes things. Now, Russia may claim to have advanced, S-500, S-550 anti-air systems that can shoot down hypersonic threats. I wouldn't want to bet my national survival on that. I'd prefer to have a situation where we didn't have intermediate range hypersonic missiles. But that's where we're at right now. The deployment of these missiles will compel a Russian reaction. That's the problem. And I'll tell you what, the missiles that Russia is going to deploy are so much better than anything the United States is going to put on German soil. The Russians just build better missiles. The Dark Eagle was supposed to be deployed, I think, last year. It isn't. Why? It's not ready, which means there's problems. Watch how fast Russia gets intermediate range missiles out of their factories, because Russia operates missile design that readily lends itself to taking a one design. To give you an example, the SS-16 missile was a intercontinental ballistic missile that was derived from the SS-20 design. It was deployed rather quickly because the Russians had already tested the SS-20. The SS-16 was just a modification of that. When the SS-16 was removed from consideration by the Strategic Arms Limitation Treaty, later on, the Russians put in the SS-25. And again, it was rapidly tested and fielded because it was a derivative of the SS-20 using the first stage and other components of similar launch systems. I will bet a dime to a dollar that the Russian intermediate range system is going to look an awful lot like a Iskander missile or an Iskander cruise missile. Similar capabilities. It's going to come out relatively quickly. The technology is there. It will have hypersonic warheads that already exist. And these missiles, Germany has no response to. Germany can't protect itself. there's no protection. There's no air defense system that can shoot this down. And you will die. Again, I don't know how to make this any clearer to Germany. There's a time when the Germans got this. I mean, I used to think the Germans were pretty cool, especially when they made a decision because, the United States was looking at how expensive it was to keep large forces, large American troop forces in Europe. And we went to the Reforger concept, which said we would have a certain number of troops there that could buy time until we deployed more troops. But then we said, well, we have to trade time and space. So we're going to pull back from the frontier, give up German territory to buy time for our troops to come in. And as we do that, we're going to use nuclear weapons to stop the Russian advance. And the Germans went, no, you're not. So why not? We have to stop the Russians. We're not going to let you use nuclear weapons on German soil. We want to forward defend. We want to push forward and defend our territory right there. We don't want to give it up to the Soviets. Forward defense became the strategy. Why? Because Germany understood what would happen if you started trading territory and using nuclear weapons. It's the end of Germany. The end of Germany. There was a time when the German people were smart. There was a time when the German people had heart, when their brains and their heart came together and they said no to nuclear weapons. They went in the streets to protest the intermediate nuclear forces. What happened to those Germans? Where did they go?
Du sprachst gerade von den Hyperschallraketen vom Typ Dark Eagle. Wie weit ist ihre Entwicklung vorangeschritten? Wann rechnest du mit ihrer Einsatzfähigkeit? Können sie mit den russischen, chinesischen und iranischen Hyperschallraketen mithalten?
First of all, let's just start with the concept of an American hypersonic doesn't need to keep up with a Russian hypersonic or a Chinese hypersonic or an Iranian hypersonic. American air defense needs to keep up with the Russian hypersonic, Chinese hypersonic, and all that to defend against it. Russian air defense, Chinese air defense, Iranian air defense needs to keep up with the American hypersonics. Hypersonics don't fight hypersonics. They fight air defense systems. So whether the Russian hypersonic capability is better than the American, it doesn't matter. Hypersonic is hypersonic. It changes the equation that military commanders and political leadership have to deal with. It basically makes decision cycles that much faster. The Americans have had problems with hypersonic missiles. We have had problems developing an air-launched version of it. The Boeing missile was taken out of development for a while. Rumors are that they maybe have it back into development. The Dark Eagle was supposed to be operational last year. It's not. Now they're talking about deployment into 2026. It's a technology that is new to the United States, and we're trying to overcome the whatever problems that we've been having. But we're going to solve it. And the Dark Eagle will be deployed in 2026. That's the goal. I don't think they would have politically committed to that date with the Germans if they weren't ready. I think that the Dark Eagle has passed its viability testing, and now it just needs to go into serial production. And then that missile now needs to be organized into units that need to train on not just how to use it, but how to sustain it, the maintenance aspects of it, and then to develop the tactics and train. It takes time. So the missile's ready today, but before we can deploy a unit to Germany, we have to create that unit, train that unit, and get all the things necessary, doctrine, etc., before that unit gets deployed forward. So that's what 2025 is going to be about. But it is by design, it's a very capable missile that will rapidly close with its target, and if functioned properly, will hit its target with precision. It can apparently employ both conventional and nuclear, warheads. And that's the danger, because even if you say, well, we don't have nuclear warheads, well, a decapitation strike is a decapitation strike. If a hypersonic precision-guided missile takes out the office in the Kremlin where Vladimir Putin is sitting 4 minutes after it's launched, why? You don't need a nuke, do you? You just achieve the decapitation. So it's extraordinarily destabilizing system, an extraordinarily destabilizing system. And again, If the German people allow this system to be deployed on its soil, you're committing suicide, literal suicide, because as I tried to explain to you, the threshold for the use of nuclear weapons has already been reduced to dangerously low levels. And if you deploy systems that remove any potential for adjusting to mistake, miscalculation, misjudgment, you create a situation where literally your demise is on full automatic. Because I can guarantee you this: you're deploying a weapon system that is not properly tested in a hyper tense environment. There will be mistakes. There will be miscalculations. And the Russians will have a hair trigger response. So the mistake will occur, and then Russians will destroy Germany. That's your future. That's a guaranteed outcome if you let these missiles on your soil. Don't let these missiles on German soil. Stop it. You have the ability. Stop it.